I watched SmackDown from Friday evening, April 14th, a date that will live in infamy, just hours ago. And if I didn't have my notes in front of me, the thing that I remember that happened on the show was LA Knight got beat again. But of course, as Gary Hart used to say, repetition is the key when dealing with goofs. If they want to make sure that everybody knows that LA Knight couldn't whip cream with an outboard motor, then they got to do it every week, and that's what they're doing. Otherwise, I will refer to my notes. And Brian, if you could just, I don't know, do you have a loud, jarring sound effect if you hear me nodding off into slumberland, somnambulism even, while I'm talking about this program?
Let me see what I got here.
Oh, gosh. It hurts. It hurts. Don't go into the light. All right, I guess I'm awake for a second now, maybe through the first hour of this thing.
I'm available for soundtracks.
I wish you were available for train tracks. Anyway, we'll let Vince and a coil of rope will take care of you there, fucking Penelope. Anyway, or Pauline, as the case, but who was always in peril? Pauline, the perils of Pauline. That's who was always in peril. I had a cousin named Peril one time. She was a homely girl. Nevertheless, I'm trying to do anything I can not to have to talk about SmackDown, but I guess we ought to just get right into it, shouldn't we? So again, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are the in-ring promo for the first segment, the new tag team champions. It's been a mere 2 weekends now since WrestleMania. And, they actually came out basically and said something that I knew but had never just looked at it in this way before. That was the first time that the tag team championship was the main event at WrestleMania in 40 fucking years or whatever. Boy, Vince, did the Graham brothers scare him or fucking frighten him or insult him, or Rocca and Perez?
Well, to be fair,
his dog one time?
To be fair, it's not the first tag team match to main event of WrestleMania, only the first tag team championship match. And many of the years that you're thinking of great tag teams, you had Hogan on top. You're going to have one of the tag teams main event over Hogan?
Well, that's true. There hadn't been any good tag teams in 30 years. All right, I'll accept that. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I think the Headbangers should have been in the main event, not Steve Austin.
I'm not saying that as much as I love Glenn and Ruth and Glenn and Ruth and Chaz Warrington as much as I love Glenn and Chaz. Oh, for fuck's sake. And speaking of love, they love Sammy. They were chanting Sammy, Sammy. I wonder how Owens feels standing there like the fucking guy that holds James Brown's cape. After all these years, they've been on somewhat of a par, and suddenly Sammy took the rocket ship to Mongo and fucking Owens stayed on the ground. I guess he exceeded the weight limit that the pilot would allow on board.
Mongo, not Metaluna.
Well, I met Luna.
No, that was on the movie was on last night.
Oh.
On Svengoolie, which you didn't watch.
Well, I was asleep. More on that next week. Anyway, so regardless of anything, they say that they're going to be the universal undisputed tag team champions in the WWE, regardless of what happens in the draft. But we know that sooner or later the Usos are coming for a rematch. Apparently it's sooner because within 3 seconds after Owens, I believe, uttered those words, the Usos music hits. And I wrote, God, can they ever change anything? It's gotten to the point, this is a parody of the parody that they started doing of wrestling, and now they're parodying themselves. A guy or a team or some talent comes out and emotes on their own in the spotlight with their own microphones, like they're giving a dramatic reading, and then suddenly, as soon as they mention somebody's name, their music plays, and they're already standing by to immediately come out with their own microphones And this went a long time and no new ground was covered when the Usos and Solo came out and they went back and forth. And finally they get in a fight. Except in this case, Riddle ran out and jumped Solo to start the big six-way. And it was an exciting little scuffle for a second. And Riddle beat up Solo, who's supposed to be the fucking badass, tough guy. And they had to jerk Solo out by his feet to keep Riddle from pouncing upon him from the heavens. And now with Riddle in this, I'm really thinking that this whole thing is starting to wear out its welcome. What do you think?
You know, maybe I'm alone on this, but throughout this show, here and then during the backstage stuff, I did have the thought that if they don't do something different with Sammy soon, I may get sick of Sammy. Because it's too much of the pacifist Sammy right now for me. And maybe I'm alone on that, and maybe this is just... Because again, the pace after WrestleMania for all of this stuff has been really, really weird. And I felt early in the show, I started thinking about it. You know, I still think they made the wrong decision at WrestleMania. Because if you think of all the possible outcomes and directions things could have gone for the Bloodline, let alone Cody Rhodes, but just the Bloodline, not really feeling all this right now. By the end, there was a little bit of intrigue, but I don't want to get there yet. But, you know, this was the first SmackDown in a while that after the opening promo, I turned it off and did other things. I didn't feel like I needed to stay around to see everything. And when I say see everything, sit through a ton of shit to get like 2 minutes of maybe good stuff at the end.
Right.
They got me to the point where I was doing that. This was the first week where I was a little tired of it. I had to go after the fact and watch it.
Well, I was about to say, but to clarify, you went back and you just weren't interested enough to stick with it on your Friday night. You went back and caught up with it. I understand.
There was nothing holding me to watching it live. There was nothing that felt like I had to see it tonight.
Here's the thing, maybe nobody's brought this up because maybe I haven't even said it in these words until right now, but maybe just because it's right there in front of you. Even if the people, the fans, the people out there, if they like the program with Sammy and Kevin and the Bloodline or then the Usos and the whole Bloodline thing, if they're liking all this story, the problem is somebody needs to tell creative that if you don't have something fairly interesting for the personalities involved in the program to do on a particular program, they don't have to interact every fucking week with each other. You've still got the packages. You can still show what happened last week or what happened on Raw. You can have Kevin and Sammy beat another tag team to get a win and defend the title, or you could have the Usos do the same, try to climb back in contention, or you can have them talking about each other without fucking in-person 10 or 15 minute monologue with each other. They don't always have to interact live for the sake of your story. Maybe they think it means ratings. If that's the case, maybe have a few more interesting people around so you can mix things up a little bit. But when they have them interact and talk endlessly and or fight in singles matches if it's a tag, or a six-man if the two captains are going to have a single, or what, just they're constantly interacting to the point where you're like, by the time they get to the big match, it's not really that unique. Does that make any sense?
It does. And again, we're going to go through an interesting period of time where this is going to test all this out. Coming out of WrestleMania, a lot of fans feel deflated. A lot of other ones don't. They want to see where things are going to go. But between now and SummerSlam, there's a lot of time and a lot of weekly television shows, a lot of hours of TV, a lot of premium live events. So we'll see how they get there.
And also, as I mentioned with Riddle, and more on that later, but the next match on the program was the Battle of the Broken Video Game. We obviously made mockery, and rightfully so, of All Friends Wrestling when they first went on the air, and they had Miro and Pip Sabian and whoever else they were involved with, I can't even remember. Maybe it was the Puddin' Gang, but they were all breaking each other's video games. And now here we are about 3 or 4 years later, and they're breaking video games on the WWE, and LA Knight broke Xavier Woods' video game. Oh, golly.
I do love the fact that Miro came in wearing a Mickey Mouse shirt, and his gimmick was he was the best man for Kip's wedding, and then that just made him the best man, and then he was just a video game fiend. And then later on, he became a brute and beat people up, and then he's off TV. Whatever Tony has pitched since then has been the creative. He's like, no, that doesn't work for me. The video game shit worked fine for him. But whatever's been pitched since then, that's too far for him.
Good God. Yeah, well, yeah, now that you put it that way. How?
But show up in your pajamas. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Put this guy over in a match. I cannot do that.
But you know what? In all honest to God, every time I hear that, the promoter in me wants to go, oh, it's working for you to cash this check, huh? Well, it ain't working for me to send you this fucking check anymore. You're going to come in and look at the fucking lights for everybody in the company, including the popcorn guy, or elsewise we're done here. But I don't. Anyway, back to this company of video game breakers. So it's Xavier Woods versus LA Knight. And I must admit that this is what really deflated me for the rest of the program, because it was 20 minutes into the show before the bell rang for the first match. And I wrote at the top, I said, oh, so they've buried LA Knight, but at least when he works, you can see somebody that looks and moves and is trying to work and act like a professional wrestler. And maybe this is the thing where he can beat a middle card babyface. just to do it, just to say, if LA Knight wins a match, are they going to have balloons and confetti drop from the ceiling? Because it's almost never happened before. Anyway, they won a couple of minutes as usual, and everything was good. I'm not saying anything's wrong with Xavier Woods as a wrestler. He's athletic, he can work, he can do good stuff, he's got oomph. It's the problem, the gimmick. The trombones and unicorns and rainbows and lollipops and cereal. And we've mentioned numerous times the singing, promos, and all the weirdness. We don't see anybody involved in the New Day because of that. But he's having a good match here with LA Knight. And they, as I said, they went a couple minutes to break. They come back. LA gets some heat. Xavier makes a comeback. Gets a false finish. 2 count. LA gets a rope. LA Knight hits a power slam and a big leap and elbow drop. And they do some back and forth. And O'Connor roll up and holds the tights, but the referee sees it. He gets off the roll up and goes and argues with the referee. And Xavier Woods, O'Connor roll ups him, if that is the proper phraseology or whatever, and pulls his tights 1, 2, 3. And I threw my hands up near. I give up. That's a great finish if your heel is over. But since he is portrayed as a complete and total loser who, when you do see him, gets his ass kicked, and you don't see him more often than you do see him, a la WrestleMania, then what the fuck is this? Just everybody in the company. Just slap him, piss on him, pin him, beat him, make a flunky out of him. What in the...
Now, does this work better to get him over, or would just having him come out there, win a match 3 out of 4 weeks, and do a promo all 4 weeks have done a better job?
Well, yeah.
That's the point. It's like this guy got himself over, and they're like, okay, now let's just keep beating him. It's like this weird WWE, like, I don't know who they're testing, the wrestler or the fans, but someone's going to give up soon enough.
Well, I was about ready to, but I thought, well, we're not really even halfway through this journey into hysteria, so I'll give it a little bit more time. And we came back from the break, and there's Gunther in the back with his boys, the Imperium. And I start listening to this for a second, and guess who walks in blowing a trombone? Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods, and every time Gunther tries to speak, he goes "Mwah," with the trombone
from right next to him.
Yes, yes, and so then they have words, and they are setting up Gunther versus Woods and his boner, and I don't want to see that either.
We have spent a lot of time talking about locker room etiquette and locker room fights. If someone blows a trombone right next to you every time you try to speak, are those grounds to kick their ass immediately?
I have never seen it come up. In my experience in wrestling, there were no trombones involved in any locker room dissension, discussion, dissertation, or aggravation. It's a brand new one on me.
Giant empty hallway. This guy and his two friends are standing there talking. They're putting up with this cameraman filming them. And all of a sudden, this guy's like, I'm going to go over there and fuck with them with my red trombone.
With my trombone. Up, up, and away with my beautiful trombone.
Not to excuse the booking of LA Knight, which has been atrocious. And I'm sure in their eyes, they're either going to repair it or this is just what it is. But does Xavier Woods beating him make a little more sense? Does Xavier Woods, I guess, winning a match make more sense because it's setting up Gunther beating him on TV?
Well, yes, that.
Although it shouldn't have been LA Knight.
It just shouldn't have been LA Knight. He could win over anyone to go get beat by Gunther, but it happened to be. So now LA Knight has been beaten by the fucking trombone player that's about to get slapped around by Gunther. So he's way down on the food chain.
And that's the problem. It's like they didn't want to do Xavier Woods versus Marcel because no one would want to see that at all. But at least LA Knight's in there, so people are intrigued by the match. He's too good. How do I phrase it? That is an old locker room common expression. He's being penalized for being too good of a worker. Yeah.
And a lot of Arn Anderson went through some of that in the 80s in Crockett, although penalized was a whole different thing back then. He was never treated like this or just beaten like a drum on television, but you were penalized when the worker of the group would always be the one to do the job. So Arn had a bit of that, but now it's a whole new level here when you don't ever actually get to even beat job guys first before you just get on TV and start losing. I can't think of any time in any territory in any period of wrestling where you brought a guy that you had any plans for whatsoever. I'm not talking about, they're poor old Cooter McGee, we'll give him a job, in first match, cards somewhere, whatever the fuck. I'm talking about anybody you brought in as a talent and intended to utilize in any fashion. They never fucking got beat once or even twice, much less weekly on television until they had a number of wins. So you knew to take them halfway seriously.
Based on who you see they're using on the roster there, who would you set up for Gunther right now?
Oh, gee, I can't even remember. The only people I can remember on the fucking roster is the Bloodline and Sammy and Kevin and Maddie Riddle, Bro, whatever his fucking name is. And
Gunther will go to Raw. That'll probably be what they do.
And the New Day and the Vikings and now we'll find out Shaky Nakamura is back here in a minute. More on that later. But it's the same 14 fucking guys on these 2 and 3 hour shows every week anyway. They've only got 150 people in developmental, and
that's the big difference between Dynamite and SmackDown. Dynamite has like 150 people on every episode. SmackDown has 8.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, moving along. Sammy, the pacifist, as you referred to him earlier, is in the back, and he doesn't want Riddle to get hurt in this thing. He's a goddamn ex-fucking MMA shoot fighter, and look at the state of Sammy. I mean, we love him. He's that lovable fucking goofball Sami Zayn, but if he ain't going to get badly hurt, I don't think Riddle is. Fucking ginger Muslim French Canadian. But like you said, it's just... And Owens has that method of delivery when, especially I've noticed from when he's not particularly 100% on board with the creative, he has that way of winking at you with his tonal quality when he's saying something. Like he's almost sending out by mental telepathy to the fans, this is what I'm supposed to be saying, but we all know it's hokey and I'm just, doing it. Kind of thing. He's not really into it. Sammy's trying to talk Riddle out of getting involved so he doesn't get hurt. And Matt Riddle may be a shoot fighting athlete. And that's the problem. They used to salivate over legitimate athletes, legitimate fighters, legitimate shooters in the wrestling business. And now they've got one up there and they have done everything possible to dress him and present him and make him look and act and speak like a complete mushed-mouth moron. What are your thoughts on that little backstage promo?
I really can't add too much to it. Again, I'm not really digging Sammy the last couple of weeks. They got to do something else with him, I think, and I'm not a big fan of Riddle. For what it was okay. I mean, them kind of explaining... Actually, that was more after this when they explained why Riddle and Solo have an issue, but I mean, you explained everything with this.
Well, then we go to the Judgment Day, and of course, if we see the Judgment Day, they're going to have to fight the other side of this equation, Rey Mysterio and his newfound friends, Pablo Escobar and the Lucha Suits. It just remains to be seen how this is going to happen, because we know what's going to happen because they do the same thing. The same people interact every fucking week. So, but in this case, they added a new wrinkle. Did you see they went to the back where there's Damian Priest, Rhea Ripley, and Dominic, and they do a backstage interview where they basically don't really say much of anything. And then they enter into the arena for an in-ring promo. They did a fucking backstage promo before their in-ring promo. What the fuck?
Yeah, I can't really explain that. I will say, though, seeing the three of them in the back without Finn Balor, it looked right.
Oh, yeah.
It looked exactly right. The three of them together, no Finn Balor, that's what it should be.
Well, they're in the ring now on their second promo in a row. So Damian Priest was in the ring, and he cut the promo on his friend Bugs Bunny that he chokeslammed through the announce desk, and Bugs is going to be the host of the pay-per-view in Puerto Rico. Damian's going to be, there's going to be trouble. We can tell there's going to be trouble right there in River City between the Bunny Man. Could that be an album like the Bunny Man? Or maybe that's his backup band. Bugs Bunny and the Bunny Men.
Shouldn't it be the Bunny Band?
Well, it could be the Bunny Band.
I think that sounds good, the Bunny Band.
That's what I said, bunny bread. Anyway, so, I hate people that sing old commercial lines that people don't know what the fuck they are. So anyway, they've showed the VTR twice, at least, of Damian slamming him through the table, and then suddenly music plays, and here comes, you'll never guess who, ladies and gentlemen, Pablo Escobar and the Lucha Suits, who attack from behind. And boom, 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 and then we go into, after a break, we come back and it's Priest and Escobar, and they're already in it. So now we got a single match amongst the factions that are involved again. And they go a couple minutes, they go to the break, and they come back, and they only go another couple minutes. And again, there's nothing wrong with this, but it's the same thing every week. And then the baby faces on the floor jumped on Dominic when he interfered, and Priest came, and it was a cool spot, but he just dumped the two Lucha Suit guys, double clothesline them both over the rail into the front row. But again, in every one of these three-man teams, whether it's Roman Reigns and the Usos, whether it's Escobar and the Lucha Suits, whether it's, help me, who else? There's always, Imperium, Gunther and Zabada and Fernum-Snavitz. There's always two flunkies and the guy, and the big guy in the other faction can just manhandle the two other guys. You see what I'm saying here? Anyway, so Damian dumps him over the rail. Escobar hits a dive. Zelina and Rhea get in a fight, and Priest choke slams Escobar 1, 2, 3. The last 90 seconds were very entertaining and chaotic, I thought. The previous 10 minutes hadn't set the world on fire. And then Priest clears off the announce desk and goes to put Escobar through it, but music plays, because who are we missing? Here comes Rey Mysterio. And he gets in a fight with Dominic, and Judgment Day pulls Dominic out, and a nice little afterbirth there. It was exciting for the last few minutes, but it's the same people that are going to do. If the baby faces are in the ring, the heels are attack them. If the heels are in the ring, then the baby faces will attack them. Am I making too much of this, or am I really seeing the same shit happen every week in the same format?
And it's not just the Judgment Day and what is now the LWO, but this is across the board on these shows. But specifically here, if the promo had gone somewhere, they kind of had me for a moment because they're a cool visual. I wanted to hear it. And I know they're trying to do something new with Escobar and his guys. And I mean, reviving the LWO from 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, I guess, is an interesting decision to make, to try to make people care about them.
Imagine if in 1998, when the LWO originally happened.
Or maybe 99. I forget what year it started.
Okay, well, let's say 99 then. 24 years ago. Let's say, what if in the Attitude Era on WCW Monday Nitro, if they had tried to bring back a gimmick that they had done in 1975? What would people have said?
Oh, no, it's a few years earlier, but that's why no one cared about the new Blackjacks. It was something from a long time ago. What would have been an example they could have done in the WCW era that they could have brought back from years earlier? I mean, it's hard to even think of examples of factions. There really weren't factions. I mean, a new Freebirds would have bombed. I mean, a new Midnight Express, we saw
well,
what
it
happened.
did.
Yeah.
It did, remember? We had to work with them in 1989.
Oh, that's right. I wasn't even thinking about Jimmy Garvin.
Yes.
That was only 10 years after they started.
And and that was 10 years after that. See what I'm saying? It's like people now, the fans that are left are holding on to the memories that they have of the last time this shit was good, and it gets longer and longer. You know, honestly, people like me did. We looked back, and you always would have, but the average fan was not nostalgic for the 60s in the 80s because the 80s was so fucking good. But now the average fan is nostalgic for the 90s, and we're in the 20s. Anyway, Paul Heyman was in the back giving the pep talk to Solo, and he mentioned every single one of the Samoans and said, don't humiliate so-and-so, and don't let so-and-so down, and Rikishi and Yokozuna and Alpha and Sika and blah, blah, blah. And finally, he worked himself up to where he got scared that he'd piss Solo off. But Solo said, yeah, tell the tribal chief I got this.
This was great. Heyman has a red phone case, which I thought was funny for whatever reason. I can't even explain why I thought that was funny. But Heyman was great here. Solo was, Solo really, if you think about it, this is a guy that really didn't impress us too much in NXT. That, of course, he has the natural connection because of his family, but they put into a main event program. They put into either upper mid-card or directly into the main event picture. And he's done really well in this role. He's done really well. He's believable. And no one complains about the fact they took a relative rookie and put him into this role. So I think that is something that should be said.
Yeah, he has done well. And I've compared him in the past. Boy, if Jacob Fatu was in that spot, just because the difference in the look and probably the experience level. But Solo has done a very good job with what they've asked him to do. And he's been thrown out there in kind of sink or swim situations sometimes. So, but again, it's genealogy. The Samoans, for whatever reason, They can do this shit.
I was waiting for Heyman to mention Manu.
Oh.
Or the Tonga Kid. I mean, I was like, who else is he going to name here? But good promo.
But he should have mentioned Chief Peter Maivia, just for the sake of it.
Well, he actually went directly with people who were blood relatives as opposed to just a general.
I know. But I'm thinking that Young Rock would have been pissed he didn't mention Chief Peter. Aloha. Hi, Chief. I think the woman that played Leah Maivia, I think she should have some kind of acting award or whatever. Anyway, moving on. So the next thing on this program was the Liv and Raquel live in-ring promo. They're the happiest girls in the whole USA. Do you remember when Raquel now, what was her name in NXT? Was it Raquel Gonzalez?
Raquel Gonzalez.
Raquel Rodriguez. We made fun of that. But when Raquel Gonzalez was in NXT, she was dressed in leather and she had a severe, striking look, and she didn't smile. And she was presented as a badass and bigger than all the girls. And you could buy her as like a female Kevin Nash, a female Diesel type of bodyguard, maybe with some annoying, whiny, bitchy, smaller girl or whatever. She was impressive. And then they put her on the main roster, and within 3 weeks, you could tell they started having her put on a bunch of makeup and smile. And we still get the big shoulder spread, but now she looks over her shoulder and smiles about it instead of being like, look at me, bitches, I can break all of you in half. And and the fluffy hair and just smiling and makeup and happy and rosy cheeks. And what they had something there. That could have been, I mean, it's almost like with the second Terminator comes back after the first Terminator. They got Ripley established. They could have had fucking Raquel the Terminator come in. There you got money. See if she can knock off Rhea Ripley, who would suddenly become a baby face if this was a year down the road, whatever the fuck. But instead, they've got this smiley girl with this smiley little girl partner and smiley little girl shit that don't make me smile. And Cruella and Chelsea interrupted, and they did a lot of WWE-style dramatic discourse, and then they got in a little cat fight, and the heels powdered out. That's what happened there. I don't mean to just steamroller you. Did you have any comments to add on that?
No, when that was on, I had something else to do.
Well, there you go. There's always that pesky thing that you got to do right when stuff like that comes on. So Shaky Nakamura is back. Again, he looks like the heel gang leader in every Golden Harvest Kung Fu movie ever. I don't know. Everybody loved him for a while, right? And then something happened by the time we started watching to where we're going, what? This was the guy that everybody said was so great?
Yeah, they called him up to the main roster. That's what happened. He was tremendous in New Japan. He was great in NXT. And then Vince got a hold of him. And, they brought him back here. He came out in a different robe, I guess I would say, than we usually see him come out in. So I was like, okay, they're bringing him back. They can do something a little different. Way back, he was a little more serious, but you can't just go completely that way because he's established that he's a artiste, as they put it. And then he took it off and he's wearing a bodysuit like the lead singer of The Darkness. So I didn't know what to think of this. I want to give him a chance because I was a big fan of him in New Japan. Him and Ishii in 2015 was the match of the year. That was the match of the year. That was such an incredible match. I mean, it was a long time ago now, though. I got to remember that. But
yeah,
I want to dig his WWE stuff, but I have not been a main roster fan of his.
Well, he is matched up here against the former Mosh Pit Jones. What's his name?
Madcap.
Madcap Moss. And Madcap now has some miscellaneous girl giving him...
It's Emma.
Basically, Emma. Okay, Emma.
I don't think they said her name, or if they did, I don't hear it, but I know who she is.
Unless it's Emma Peel, I don't give a shit.
She's dead.
Well, then I don't give a shit. but she's not just giving him a pep talk. She's basically giving him instructions. So I remember when I saw this guy, I said, this guy's a great fucking athlete. He had a match once with somebody where he kind of sort of just wrestled. And I said, holy shit, he's a great athlete. His shit looks good with direction and a real name and a gimmick. You could do something with it, but that has continued to not happen. He had a horrible gimmick with Corbin. He's had a rotten name. Now he's being told what to do by some random girl wrestler. And the bell rang for the match. We were an hour and a half into the show for the second match. And basically, I said, I'm going to watch this to see Moss, and because I've liked him in the past athletically, and see what shake he has to offer these days. And the very first thing that happened was Moss hits a shoulder into the turnbuckle and then picks Nakamura up like a scoop slam, apparently trying to boost him for a drop behind. And both of them just fell in a heap on the mat. And I said, well, fuck. And I hit fast forward, but it didn't really matter because within 1 minute later, Nakamura had already beat him 1, 2, 3. So thanks for coming, Mosh Pit. And here's another thing that I would like possibly a moratorium declared on. I've mentioned many times that wrestlers are the worst criminals in the world, right? Every time they commit a crime or break the law in any way, they actually do it on video with a camera, right 5 or 10 feet from them. So in this case, the camera is in the back following Brown Strongman and Ricochet just walking and chatting with each other. It's not even an interview that's been set up. There's no reason for the camera to be on them. They're just walking down the hallway. And suddenly, 5 seconds later, the Vikings come in and beat the teetotal shit out of them. Never noticing the television camera 5 feet away from them. What? And that was it. They just beat him up, and that was it. 30 seconds. What? Why? It's boring at this point. It happens weekly, multiple times a week, and it's so fucking fake.
I'm not a Braun Strowman fan, but considering the way they're using him, they must have got a sweetheart deal when they brought him back. Right? Because they're not using him like someone they're paying a considerable amount of money to.
No. Well, I mean, what were his options? Turn over fucking buses or goddamn come back with hat in hand, I guess.
Or he could control his narrative.
And, well, apparently the narrator said, and Brown was losing money, leaking like a sieve, and decided to go back to the only job he's ever had that paid him any money. And then finally we came to the main event, which was Riddle versus Solo. And I know I have a journalistic duty, but after this show, and it's Riddle, and I zoned out. They didn't go that long to begin with. Well, basically...
What about Heyman's promo at the beginning?
Well, hold on. That's what I was going to say. Because basically, I was starting to skip ahead a bit, and then I saw Heyman speaking. So I was okay. And Paul makes a big announcement that 2 weeks from tonight on SmackDown, it's going to be the rematch, the Usos and Zayn and Owens for the tag team title. And Paul's last line is, and the Usos are looking at Zayn and Owens, and they're breathing fire and huffing and puffing. And Paulie's looking at Sammy and Kevin, but then he says, because that will settle it, because Roman Reigns is losing patience with the two of you. But he turned to look at the Usos, and the Usos didn't notice that he had turned to look at them, assuming that he was talking to Sammy and fucking Kevin.
That moment was the payoff for watching this whole episode.
And then, instead of going into the match, they went to another break. So they actually had entrances and another promo, and then they go to the break again. So they came back, they had 4 minutes a match. They came back, they had 3 minutes a match. And it's Riddle, so who gives a shit? And then, I know you'll never believe this, ladies and gentlemen, But Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and the Usos got in a fight on the floor. And Riddle flipped and dove on the Usos, and then Solo just hit him with the fucking spike 1, 2, 3. And then Solo threw Riddle over the announcer's desk and turned the desk over on top of him. And then Sammy and Kevin went to dig him out, and all the heels made faces. So that was basically the announcement is in 2 weeks from tonight, and again, when are the Usos going to watch this show and find out Heyman was talking to them? But otherwise, it was 2 hours. There was 4 matches, and none of them were particularly scintillating, or even at least it's not like AEW. You get a bad match in AEW, it goes on forever. You get a bad match in the WWE, just like any good match, it doesn't last very long at all. And that was SmackDown.
And the problem is those segments with Heyman and everything he does, and when Roman Reigns is actually there, and a lot of the intrigue around the Usos and everything else, it's great stuff, but you sit through this whole show, and if you really think about it, if you said, make me a compilation tape of all the good stuff with the Bloodline the last, since 2023 began, it would be a 2-hour tape or less.
Yeah.
There's so little of the actual good stuff we get on these shows, and so many commercials at weird times. Maybe the guy who formats the show is the guy who has to run around and get everyone as soon as their name is mentioned. To run out there and have the music played. But you sit through a lot of crap for, like I said, the payoff for this whole episode was Heyman, the Heyman promo in the back, but Heyman looking at the Usos, and then they just cut the break. That was the highlight of the whole show.
Well, there you have it.